Welcome here tonight at Judson, and this is going to be a really exciting program. I'm Elaine Brower, a member of the New York City Coalition to Stop Islamophobia, and I just wanted to thank you for joining our event this evening. Our panel presentation topic is the violation of human rights. The war on terror continues at home and abroad. We will address how fear and anti-Muslim bigotry is being mobilized to enable political prosecution, entrapment, targeted assassinations, indefinite and abusive detentions, unjust occupations of Muslim and Arab countries, while at home we face the rise in Islamophobia. With us tonight we have 4 guest speakers. They will present their ideas, perspectives, and opinions on this topic, as well as address the issues that concern us all. We really hope you enjoy this program. Take a moment to please turn your cell phones off. At the end of the presentations, there will be time devoted to questions and answers, and I'm sure we'll have a very lively discussion about the presentations that were given. I just wanted to mention briefly that our coalition started in July of this year, and there were some of us who live on Staten Island who faced some horrible things that happened in one of our local neighborhoods where the local residents came out against the building of a mosque in the area of Midland Beach, Staten Island. So we were out there protesting for the building and acquisition of the property for the Muslim American Society. And there were some really horrible community board meetings. People were attacking our Muslim community, and we decided to reach out to our friends in other organizations, and we formed this loose coalition of people. We've done many protests, we've had events, educational forums, and we hope that you will join us. We have a sign-up sheet here. I'll put you on the announcement list. And if you want to help us organize anything, we'd appreciate it. This is a very important topic. And tonight you're going to hear stories from every perspective on this. So first, I'd like to introduce Pardiss Kabreai. She's a staff attorney for the Center for Constitutional Rights. She's challenging the Obama administration's targeted assassination order on Anwar al-Awlaki, an American citizen residing in Yemen, in a lawsuit filed by CCR and the ACLU. Ms. Kabreai will discuss this case, as well as the arguments presented by the Obama administration to prevent judicial review of the case. Let's give her a warm welcome.
For being here, and thanks to the sponsors who had this program, and for being so supportive in general of CCR.
Close it now. It went off.
Okay, is that better? Now I can do it. Okay. It said thank you. Just to all the sponsors who had this panel and have continually supported CCR and this case in particular, which I think is extremely important and has gotten sort of clouded. What it sort of stands for and how it's trying to challenge, I think, the expansion of presidential power and the expansion of the war has sort of gotten and the particular allegations against the person it involves, which are really secondary. So anyway, thank you. So the case, as I was saying, is one that CCR and the ACLU filed that is trying to get at the unchecked expansion of this so-called war against terrorism that the Bush administration started, and the Obama administration is continuing and indeed escalating, but in less visible and unacknowledged ways. And that's specifically, what this case is about. I wanted to start with, I know I'm talking to people who are very informed about the war in Afghanistan and the war against terrorism, but I just wanted to start with a little bit about the war in Afghanistan, and just to note that in June of 2010, that war surpassed as I'm sure everyone knows here, the Vietnam War is the longest running war in American history, where the U.S. has spent over $190 billion in military spending to date, has lost over 1,400 of its own troops, has contributed to over 10,000 civilian casualties from 2006 to 2010 alone, and where the administration is now, as we know, talking about staying until 2014, which is a clear move away from President Obama's explicit promise to begin significant troop withdrawals in mid-2011. So that's that, but separate from the devastation and the cost and everything else that's going on in Afghanistan, about which there is some acknowledgement and visibility, even if it is not enough, and even if there is still no accountability for that war, there is a wholly unacknowledged, invisible, and unaccountable war, or expansion of the war that's happening in Pakistan, and it has been happening in Pakistan, in Yemen, and in the Horn of Africa, through secret U.S. military forces and the CIA, and that's what I wanted to spend more time talking about. In Pakistan, while the CIA has been conducting drone strikes for several years, and which began under the Bush administration, the number of strikes has nearly tripled under the Obama administration, and has resulted in hundreds of deaths, civilian deaths and casualties. And while the Obama administration has publicly defended its asserted global authority to conduct these strikes, and U.S. officials have privately raved about the effectiveness of these strikes, particularly through drones, the White House has never officially acknowledged this program, the existence of it, or at all acknowledged responsibility for the resulting deaths. In Yemen, too, which is the focus of our particular case, the U.S. has continued to deny the full extent of its operations, which have been escalating since at least 2009, and about which we now, thanks to cables released through WikiLeaks, have some greater clarity about the role of the United States. According to a January 2010 cable that has not got enough attention in my view, news organizations reported a meeting between General Petraeus and President Saleh of Yemen, in which they discussed U.S. airstrikes, where the president lamented the use of U.S. cruise missiles that he described as not very accurate, and welcomed the use of aircraft-deployed precision-guided bombs instead, and then reportedly said, quote, "We'll continue saying the bombs are ours, not yours," which then prompted the Deputy Prime Minister to joke that he had just lied by telling his parliament that the bombing in 3 regions of Yemen, including one in the Abiyan area in the south of the country in December of 2009, were American-made but deployed by the government of Yemen. That particular strike in the Abiyan region, for example, reportedly killed 55 people, 41 of whom were civilians, including 14 women and 21 children. But in reporting at the time, the U.S. obliquely kind of said, yes, we provided some intelligence and we provided some support, but the strike was reported as primarily, as having been conducted by Yemeni security forces. And Amnesty International, in a report released this year, has said that at least 113 people have been killed since the beginning of 2009 in Yemen, again, reportedly in raids that were conducted by Yemeni security forces, but which these leaks indicate the U.S. had at least had a direct role in at least some of those strikes. So that's just sort of the background in terms of the expansion and the unaccountability for the expansion that's happening in Pakistan and Yemen, and again, that this case that we filed is trying to get at. And I'll just get a little bit now into the specifics of the case. The case specifically challenges an authorization by the President and the CIA and Secretary Gates for the targeted killing of a U.S. citizen by the name of Anwar al-Awlaki, who is in Yemen. The government, as I said, has made some strong allegations against him. If you've been reading the newspapers, it's hard not to know what they've been saying. But that has really tried to cloud the core issues that are at issue in the case, which are, again, about the scope of the government's authority to conduct war in places and against people who are not on recognized battlefields, and whether the government can, as it is claiming to be, as it is doing, to determine on its own secret evidence, through its own secret process, that an individual, and in this case a U.S. citizen, is an enemy of the state and order his deliberate killing. That is what the case is about. The allegations are allegations at this point, whatever one may think about them, but the core issues are really what the scope of this administration's power in conducting war really is. And one thing I want to make clear, and I just say this so that people have facts about the case because it's been distorted in an attempt to sort of make it seem like a very radical, extreme case, which it really is not. It really is about fundamental rule of law issues. But you know, the case does not claim you know, that the government could never use lethal force against an individual who may threaten the United States. It really is saying that in this circumstance, in Yemen, a country with which the United States is not at war, the U.S. Constitution applies. And under that standard, if you're going to kill someone, you can only use lethal force in self-defense. And there are constitutional requirements for when you can use lethal force. A person has to present an imminent threat, a concrete threat of deadly harm, and lethal force. Killing has to be, because killing is an extreme measure, has to be a last resort. That is not a novel proposition. That's not an extreme position. It is the law that governs every law enforcement officer in this country, and law enforcement activities that have involved and addressed national security threats. But the government is really trying to paint this case as a completely extreme fringe case that would threaten the national security of this country. But again, that really just gets at very basic constitutional and sort of rule of law issues. So I just wanted to sort of be clear about what the position in the case is, you know, so that our allies can respond to some of the attacks on the case. But separate from the legal issues, which are sort of separate from the public advocacy messages we're trying to bring into the case, but separate from the legal issues and the merits of the case, what we are trying to establish right now is again, just a very basic goal of trying to get a court to actually review the case, to actually address it. And the government's response to our case, we filed in August of 2010, and in responding to our case, the Department of Justice under Obama did not respond with to any of the merits. They didn't come forward and say, this is why we think we can do this. They came forward with technical defenses that go to three things. One is that the particular person who is bringing the case, which is the father of Anwar al-Awlaki, who is bringing the case because his son is in hiding under threat of death and cannot access the court himself, that he cannot act for his son because we haven't proven that his son couldn't bring the case himself. Two, and this is probably the scarier and more extreme position, that the case presents political questions, and political question is sort of a doctrine in the law that basically says that if a case involves national security and military affairs, that those issues are in the exclusive realm of the executive branch, and that the courts should have no business basically interfering. So the case should be dismissed on that ground as well. And third, even if our client, the father of Anwar, had standing to bring the case, and even if the case did not present political questions and could proceed, the government would have to, if the case did proceed, disclose sensitive state secrets that could threaten national security and that it should not be required to disclose. So the government's presented three grounds, or had presented three grounds, three separate grounds for the judge to kick the case out of court, none of which went to its targeted killing policy or its legal justification for asserting this authority to be able to carry out war in a country in which it is not at war with, and to kill a U.S. citizen without any kind of process. And the judge unfortunately agreed. So the decision came out just a few days ago, and I can't believe it was just this week because it's been a really long week. But the judge agreed, and that is sort of where we are now, is just trying to get the case reviewed in court. The court itself